I'm allowing the plants to build their own electric. I'm allowing them to become an electric utility so they can produce their own electricity, because we need double to be successful with AI, which is the biggest thing now. We need double the electricity that we have, which is hard to believe. We need even more than that.
Department. According to new projections, Americans could face up to 800 hours of blackouts per year by 2030. That's more than a month without power, and it's raising some questions about the reliability of our electric grid.
Canada just slammed the brakes on a massive electricity export deal. 30 years of guaranteed U.S. supply gone in an instant. For decades, Washington counted on Canadian power as a quiet pillar of America's energy security. Hydroelectric dams in Ontario and Quebec kept the lights on in Midwest cities, stabilized grids during blackouts, and fed the industrial heartland. But now, Ottawa is pulling the plug, reshaping North America's energy map. This isn't just a contract dispute, it's a geopolitical earthquake. By blocking long-term exports, Canada is signaling it will no longer play second fiddle in America's energy strategy. Instead, it's positioning itself as the gatekeeper of critical power flows, leveraging electricity the same way it's begun to leverage minerals like cobalt and nickel. So the big question, what does this mean for U.S. energy security, and who really holds the power now? Stick around, hit like, subscribe, and keep watching. The story begins in Ontario, where a $17.5 million pledge from the provincial government in 2025 lit the fuse on North America's first large-scale cobalt refinery. At first glance, it seemed like just another industrial investment, the kind of announcement buried on page 5 of the business section. But peel back the layers and it becomes obvious. This was never just about cobalt. This was about leverage. Electra Battery Materials Refinery in Temiskaming Shores is designed to churn out 6,500 tons of battery-grade cobalt sulfate every year, enough to power 1 million electric vehicles. By 2027, this site will stand as the cornerstone of a mine-to-market supply chain, stretching from copper at McKevlin Bay to gold at Red Chris and nickel across northern Canada. The project carries a $100 million price tag, stitched together by U.S. Department of Defense funding, $20 million USD, a federal Canadian contribution, $20 million CAD, and $30 million in private equity. Ontario's investment cuts Electra's debt by more than 60%, stabilizing the company and ensuring production is locked in. Now here's the twist. This refinery wasn't built just to boost Canada's economy. It was built to cut America's dependence on China, a country that currently dominates cobalt refining, controlling nearly the entire global supply. For years, Washington's defense sector quietly panicked over the fact that its fighter jets, satellites, and missile systems all relied on minerals processed in China. The refinery at Temiskaming Shores changes that equation, on paper at least. It gives the U.S. an alternative source of supply. But here's the catch. The value stays in Canada, and that's exactly why Ottawa just blocked a 30-year electricity export deal to the U.S. The message couldn't be clearer. Canada isn't just a friendly neighbor handing over cheap power and raw materials anymore. It wants to be the gatekeeper. Whether it's cobalt, nickel, or hydroelectricity, Ottawa is reframing every deal as a strategic tool in its arsenal. Consider this. Ontario and Quebec's hydroelectric exports once made up a reliable lifeline for the U.S. Midwest and New England. These long-term contracts kept Detroit's auto plants humming, stabilized Chicago's grid, and even shielded New York from blackouts. But by refusing to renew a new 30-year export deal, Canada is signaling that electricity, like cobalt, isn't just another commodity. It's a bargaining chip. For Ottawa, this isn't just about protecting its domestic energy needs. It's about wielding energy the same way oil-rich states wield barrels of crude as a lever of influence. Canada sees where the world is headed, a transition away from oil and gas toward electricity and critical minerals. And it doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, where resources flowed south cheaply, while Canada absorbed the environmental cost. The refinery is the perfect example. By tying federal funding, provincial funding, and U.S. defense dollars into one project, Ottawa has created a supply chain that can't easily be replicated. America may think it's buying security, but Canada is buying leverage. Every ton of cobalt produced in Temiskaming Shores will remind Washington that its supply lines run through Ottawa, not Beijing. Blocking electricity exports amplifies that leverage. It puts pressure on U.S. policymakers, especially at a time when Trump's new tariffs are already reshaping trade dynamics. With rising costs on manufactured imports, America desperately needs stable energy inputs to keep its industries competitive. Losing access to predictable Canadian power throws a wrench into that calculation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Washington can't simply replace this power overnight. Building new generation capacity takes years, sometimes decades, and U.S. utilities are already grappling with aging infrastructure, high costs, and regulatory hurdles. Canada knows this. Ottawa knows it's holding the stronger hand in the short term, and it's playing that card aggressively. The Cobalt Refinery may look like a shiny industrial project, but in reality, it was the dress rehearsal. Electricity is the main event. Canada is telling the U.S., if you want reliable energy for the next 30 years, you're going to play by Ottawa's rules. And that's just the first ripple. Because if electricity is now on the bargaining table, what's next? Minerals, pipelines, cross-border water rights? This decision signals a much broader shift. Canada positioning itself not as America's junior partner, but as a rival power broker. But to understand why Canada is making this bold move, we need to dive deeper into the numbers, the economics, and the long-term strategy Ottawa is quietly building. When you step back and connect the dots, Canada's decision to block a 30-year electricity export deal looks less like an isolated policy and more like a carefully calculated strategy. Think of it as a chess move, one that repositions Ottawa not as a quiet supplier, but as a regional power broker. The Cobalt Refinery in Temiskaming Shores was the opening gambit. Electricity is the next piece in play. And the United States? It suddenly finds itself playing catch-up. Let's start with the economics. Electra's refinery isn't just producing cobalt, it's producing revenue. With 6,500 tons of cobalt sulfate per year, the facility could generate between $160 and $230 million annually, depending on market prices. That money stays in Canada, circulating through Ontario's northern towns and industrial base, while carving out a foothold in global EV supply chains. Compare that with hydro exports. Electricity sales historically sent billions of dollars worth of cheap Canadian power south, but the value-added benefits stayed in the U.S. Blocking the New Deal is Ottawa's way of saying, enough is enough. This shift isn't only economic, it's political. By holding back electricity, Canada is sending a message to Washington. Partnership can no longer be taken for granted. America has long assumed Canadian energy would flow south like water over Niagara Falls, endless and automatic. But Bill C-5, Ottawa's streamlined approval framework, has given Canada the legal tools to treat energy exports more selectively. It allows faster approvals for strategic projects while tightening control over what leaves the country. Take the Midwest, home to heavy manufacturing, auto production, and agricultural processing. These industries depend on predictable energy costs to remain competitive. Without Canadian hydro, American utilities are forced to lean on aging coal plants, expensive natural gas, or renewable projects that are still years from full deployment. The result: higher costs, weaker competitiveness, and rising political pressure. And here's where Trump's tariffs make the picture even more complicated. The administration has slapped duties on imported steel, aluminum, and autos, hoping to force companies back onto U.S. soil. But those same industries now face skyrocketing energy costs without Canadian supply. In other words, Ottawa's decision doesn't just hit America's power grid, it strikes at the heart of Trump's economic playbook. From Canada's perspective, this is the perfect counterpunch. For years, Washington has leaned on tariffs, trade threats, and diplomatic pressure to extract concessions. By blocking electricity exports, Ottawa is flipping the script. Suddenly, it's the U.S. that looks dependent, and Canada that holds the leverage. Energy becomes a bargaining chip in every negotiation, from tariffs to defense contracts to cross-border infrastructure. The implications stretch far beyond power plants and cobalt refineries. If Canada can weaponize electricity exports, it can just as easily apply the same logic to critical minerals, pipelines, or even fresh water. Remember, global demand for cobalt, nickel, and lithium is expected to surge by 500% in the next decade. Whoever controls the refining and distribution of those resources controls the terms of trade. Canada is positioning itself to be that controller, not the supplier of last resort, and the timing couldn't be more significant. With the global energy transition accelerating, the U.S. is scrambling to secure stable supply chains outside of China. Yet Canada is quietly showing that it doesn't need to be America's backup plan. Instead, it can become the gatekeeper of North America's clean energy future. Washington may not like it, but it can't afford to ignore it. The ripple effects are already being felt. Investors see Canada's tightening grip as both an opportunity and a risk. Domestic projects look safer, while U.S. industries look exposed. Communities in Ontario and Quebec, once worried about being resource colonies, now see themselves as critical hubs of strategic power. In the end, the Cobalt Refinery was the warning shot. Blocking the electricity deal is the escalation. And if Washington doesn't adjust its strategy fast, it could soon find itself negotiating every major trade decision with Canada holding the switch. So here we are. Canada has drawn its line in the sand, and the US is left staring at a future where the lights don't switch on without Ottawa's blessing. The Cobalt Refinery was just the start, a signal that Canada can no longer be boxed in as America's resource warehouse. By blocking a 30-year electricity export deal, Canada has rewritten the rules of the game, transforming power itself into a weapon of leverage. For Washington, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's a wake-up call. Energy security can no longer be taken for granted, and Canada's new role as gatekeeper will shape every trade negotiation to come. But what do you think? Is Ottawa making a bold stand for sovereignty, or is it risking a dangerous split with its closest ally? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and stay tuned.